Good evening, Chicago. I'm Hugo Balta along with Dr. Suzet McKinney, and this is Chicago Newsroom 2.0.
Swati Staley, Adrian Segura, and Watis Gathings join Hugo at the roundtable to discuss the latest news, including President Trump's escalating threats to send national troops into the city, the continuing turmoil at CPS, and the hiccup in the plan to insert former Alderman Walter Burnett into the top job at CHA.
Suzet sits for a one-on-one with the new president of Columbia College Chicago, Dr. Shante Bolton, to learn more about her plans to put the struggling institution back on track to success.
New Americans Advisory Council's Abby Eusebio, La Raza Editor-in-Chief Jesus Del Toro, and Immigrant Legal Defense Project's Laura Chalula Chang are in studio discussing the Trump administration's intensified targeting of Chicago's immigrant communities.
And Chicago Inspector General Deborah Witzburg returns to the program with the premiere of the new monthly segment, Inside Oversight.
We have a can't-miss hour of hyper-local news and information that directly impacts the lives of Chicagoans, and it all starts right now.
At the roundtable this week, we're taking on three stories that cut right to the heart of Chicago's politics, governance, and future. First, President Trump continues his threats to send in the National Guard. It's a move that raises questions about federal overreach, local control, and what it would really mean for our city. Second, turmoil continues inside Chicago Public Schools. Yes, the district has an approved budget, but battles over leadership, labor unrest, and long-term stability are far from settled. For parents, teachers, and students, the sense of uncertainty lingers. And third, the City Council is now holding off on confirming former Alderman Walter Burnett as the next CEO of Chicago Housing Authority. The delay comes as his son was recently appointed to his old council seat, sparking debate over political dynasties, transparency, and the direction of one of the city's most critical agencies. Joining me now to break it all down are three exceptional and exceptionally bright civic leaders. Swati Staley, partner at Just Act Partners. Adrian Segura, president of the Luminary Collective and Can TV's chief education correspondent. And Watis Gathings, the host of the new Can TV original series, Sisters Talking. Swati, Adrian, Watis, welcome very much. Thank you for joining us. Let's get right to it. Swati, I wanted to start with you. What are the constitutional and practical implications of a president sending federal troops into a city without the request of its mayor or governor? Even Megyn Kelly this week has publicly stated that this is utterly unconstitutional and the president should not do it.
I think you captured it perfectly. When Megyn Kelly is speaking truth to constitutional issues, I think there's some concerns to be had. But absolutely, this is an unprecedented use of military force domestically that is unheard of in our country's history in terms of utilizing military force in a domestic capacity. So absolutely, this is an unconstitutional use of armed forces. It has been challenged in both DC and LA for good reason. It's absolutely a show of partisan force that is not intended to help the city of Chicago. There's no coordination. There's no request coming from the city. There's no request coming from the governor. This is absolutely a show of force that is just that, a show.
Yeah. A flexing of political muscle that unfortunately the most vulnerable are going to be the ones that are being hurt. Watis, I want to continue with you. How might this threat play politically, both for Trump and on the national stage, for local leaders here in Chicago?
Our president clearly has a base of followers that appreciate his approach. I don't think that there's anything surprising about his actions now that hasn't been surprising over the last few months and even during his last presidency. I think that he secured his future in the minds of those who believe that not all citizens should be treated with a certain level of decency and respect. And that's playing out in this scenario too, because some cities, like those who are ran by mayors like Mayor Johnson, don't deserve a seat at the table to discuss what needs to happen in the lives of our community members. And that's just wrong. And I think his base does not care what line he's willing to break. I think locally, I, for one, have been extremely proud of both our mayor and governor for the stance and the position they've taken. I also think Mayor Johnson has gotten a lot of slack over his tenure, and in some cases, rightfully so, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that today. But I think the reality of it is what we have proven out in this moment that's shown really well from the national stage is his public safety interventions are working. He's invested in young people, he's invested in mental health, and restoring people is what's going to ultimately help Chicago become safer for all. And I think that his work and his effort towards those initiatives, I think right now, having this attack from the federal government is allowing him to put on the national stage exactly what supporting people looks like.
Yeah, and this is a making or breaking situation for Mayor Brandon Johnson, and I think, as you said, he's doing the right thing in standing toe-to-toe with Trump, against Trump.
Yeah.
Now,
and I want to add too, this is not a playbook that he's deploying as a response to the federal government. This is what he said since he's gotten in office on day one and has tried to execute against. And I think our city's finally realizing some of the benefits of those results. He hasn't had proper coverage across all Chicago issues, but when it comes down to investing in people and being concerned about public safety, he's tried to have a conjoined effort at this from the very beginning. And I'm happy to see that he's finally catching somewhat of a win and being able to discuss it at a federal level.
yeah, look, and no one is saying that the city is free of some of the issues that Trump is using as an excuse to send the National Guard. Chicago has certainly struggled with violence for decades, Adrian. Would deploying the National Guard do anything to address the root causes, or would it escalate tensions?
I think reiterating what we've heard Swati share, Wati share, right? It's this idea that, like, you know, what is it responding to? The governor hasn't called for federal support. The mayor hasn't called it in. Like, it really does feel like it's going to create a scenario where it's not being responsive to local needs. It's not rooted in any sort of like evidence of what we aim to achieve collectively together. And there's no real plan in place. I think, you know, what we are hearing and what we're seeing unfold, unfortunately, is very much kind of like a show playing out. And, you know, I will say the resources and the cost to deploy National Guard to the city could best be used. If you were to ask the governor, or if you were to ask the mayor today, like, how would they potentially use those resources? I guarantee it would be rooted in community experience. Some of the things that Wati's mentioned here, like things that we know are successfully curbing violence, would likely be, you know, more reinforced and more funded. Unfortunately, that's not even an option on the table right now. Again, it is a bully tactic to kind of bully your way in, and it's also very clear and evident that the targets are on cities, predominantly in blue states, that have sanctuary policies. And so all those things to me tell me just, again, it's not anything that's rooted in any research. It's not, you know, anything that's backed by community. It's a small base that plays to his kind of like ego in many ways. And unfortunately, I think part of what we're seeing play out is at the expense of residents of the city of Chicago.
Yeah, certainly not around this table, but there are people that are supportive of the National Guard coming. One of them being perennial mayoral candidate Willie Wilson and current 15th Ward Alderman Raymond Lopez. Both have said their support of troops being deployed in our city. What are your thoughts? Let's start with you, Swati.
I mean, my question to them would be, for what? You know, to Adrian's point, there's no coordinated plan with the alders. There's no coordinated plan with the mayor. There's no coordinated plan with the governor. So where are they getting the information that this could be helpful when there is absolutely no information indicating the level of support that is going to supposedly be provided by the National Guard? There's no plan. There's no integrated coordination at all. And so my question is what is that based on, that they feel like this will be a helpful tool in the city? We've seen in DC that the National Guard has been deployed to clean up garbage on the side of the road. I mean, is that what they're coming to do here? I mean, they can help on the 9094 construction projects if that's what they choose to do. But again, I don't know how they have any basis to say that the National Guard is a useful tool when there is absolutely no plan or no coordination happening with the city of Chicago.
Yeah, and Ortiz, you mentioned the mayor's response so far has been a positive one. One of the concerns that I hear from residents is the escalation of tensions. And as it often happens, there are the protesters that are protesting for their causes, but then there are the bad actors that end up showing up once the protest is over. As far as a response and preparing for a possible escalation, what do you think both the city and with the support of the governor, how should they be planning for tensions escalating and the possibility of civil unrest?
Listen, I think our city leaders have been very proactive as it relates to this topic. I think there's calls happening almost daily with different organizations around the city, helping them understand what the response will be, what to do in the instant that they see, ICE or individuals in our community. So I think when it comes down to a coordinated effort, I think back to kind of the response we had during COVID and other times, I think the city is really working hard to make sure not just elected officials have a position and posture around this topic, but also community organizers and groups have a posture too. And so I think they're doing all they can to respond to that. I think obviously when it happens and we're at the moment, there's going to be different things that we have to navigate and pivot from. But the awareness, the coordination, seeing them all stand on the united front to make sure messages are clear back to Washington, I think have all been very, very strong. And every leader that I've talked to that is bracing themselves, especially those who support Latino communities, have been very pleased with the support of the administration in Chicago.
Yeah, communication is key, especially in a situation as volatile as this. I have two children, they're both in college. This is also a learning moment. What are the conversations that we should be having around the dinner table with our children about what's happening politically, as well as from the perspective of the community coming together? Your thoughts, Adrian?
It's funny, I was actually talking to my daughter last night over dinner, and it's less about engaging in conversation around like what's happening politically, and it's more about starting with like what our values are. Like, what are things that we believe in? Because I think oftentimes, like with youth, in my experience as a teacher, whether it's aligning your leadership teams when you're running organizations, or trying to structure a conversation around like really difficult topics with the family, like I think it's got to be rooted in like what you fundamentally believe in. I think I would say there's an opportunity for families to share what their beliefs are, but also create safe spaces for our youth, for others to engage, whether it's at the community level. But I do think that a big part of what's missing in this dialogue, like right now, what gets drowned out in the political sphere, in the media sphere, it's, kind of like what the governor says, what the mayor says, what Trump says, what their proxies say. And what's missing is like real, authentic kind of like voices from communities stating what they believe in. I think so much of it is we want to put people in camps that, you either support the governor, support the mayor, support Trump. And I think communities in particular are not monolithic in that way. I think a big part of it is trying to understand what are our values, what are our beliefs. And I think that to me feels like once you start there as a dinner conversation, then you can say, based on those beliefs and based on what we're seeing unfold, how do we respond?
Yeah.
Right.
Let's quickly move on to the turmoil at Chicago Public Schools. Even with the budget in place, CPS is still in flux. What's driving the continued turmoil, and who is most at risk from this instability, Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, there are a variety of factors that are driving this. I think a big part of that is, we've had a lot of major transitions in a very short amount of time. And CPS is, used to dealing with transitions, but I think, there was a budget that was in play with one CEO, and then there's an interim that had to carry that budget conversation throughout. And so those transitions we're seeing play out and unfold in front of us. I think there are a host of challenges that we still need to tackle. Right? Preliminary numbers came out, and CPS is expected to lose another 10 to 13,000 students this year. I think there's a report that came out that about half of our buildings are sitting underutilized. And so I think there are real challenges. Yes, budget passed, but then there are all these, host of challenges that I think the district still has to figure out what the strategic plan is going to look like to tackle some of these.
Yeah. And now quickly going on to Walter Burnett's appointment to CHH CEO, why has CHH board hit the pause button on Burnett's appointment, and what's likely the outcome, Swati?
Well, I think, the board is rightfully doing their due diligence on potential conflict of interest issues, right? There is a process that is to be followed. CHA receives significant funding from HUD and is required to follow a number of conflict of interest and ethical rules. And so the board hitting pause on Alderman Burnett's appointment to CEO is not necessarily an indication of any distrust or really a break in that process. It's just ensuring that the process is properly followed and any conflicts of interest are addressed by HUD and by all of the necessary legal authorities that are intended to ensure that these dollars are being used for the right reasons and are supporting Chicago residents in the way that they're intended. So I think it's a pause on the process, but I think ultimately will pass.
With Chicago facing an affordable housing crisis, what's at stake with CHA leadership remaining in limbo? Watis?
I think CHA is one of those agencies, given the crisis that we're facing in our city around homelessness and other things, that has to be addressed. And I think that, the mayor is trying to move quickly, but as Swati mentioned, that there are processes in place for a reason. So don't necessarily view the slowdown as any indication of anything concerning other than making sure the checks and balances are there. But obviously, critical seats like CHA needs to be occupied. The seat's been vacant for a while. There's no current interim CEO. So the quicker we can get to it, the more better off we'll be, especially as we think about cuts and other things coming to housing vouchers, et cetera, that will impact regions like Chicago quite a bit. We should probably have a coordinated plan.
Yeah. And finally, late last week, Mayor Johnson appointed Burnett's son to his old aldermanic seat, renewing concerns about political dynasties. Is this a lovely, uplifting story of a son following in his father's footsteps, or another painful example of politics at its worst, Swati?
This is an interesting one because I don't know that anyone is necessarily questioning Burnett Jr.'s real qualifications for this role, but the reality is that the appearances of a longtime alderman asking for his son to take his place does show a bit of it raises questions, I think, in the mayor's eyes that as to how we're approaching this topic in aldermanic sort of history. There's always been instances of political dynasties in the city, and I think they're rightfully looked at with some skepticism. And so I think that this is an instance of a self-inflicted wound, I think, on the mayor's part, where I think there are other qualified candidates that would have given the mayor a very quick win. Not to say that Burnett's son is not qualified. I think that there are other qualified candidates that would have been better in the seat and would have been inflicted less political pain on the mayor in this instance. But I feel like it's a self-inflicted wound on the mayor's part.
Yeah, as always, too many topics, not enough time. Swati, Adrian, Watis, thank you so much for joining us and for your insights. On the other side of this break, Suzette sits down for a one-on-one interview with the new president of Columbia College Chicago, Dr. Bolton. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Bianca Cotton, inviting you to tune in to a new episode of Behind the Confident Smile, when I unpack motherhood meets medical crisis with my guest, Javielle Anderson. Tune in on CAN TV, cable channel 19, or stream online at cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
Chicago is home to some of the nation's most influential colleges and universities. And today, one of those institutions is beginning a new chapter. Columbia College Chicago, known for shaping generations of artists, storytellers, and media professionals, has welcomed its new president, Dr. Shante Bolton. Dr. Bolton brings with her a track record of leadership in higher education with a focus on student success, equity, and innovation. As Columbia navigates challenges facing higher education, from rising costs and enrollment pressures to the changing demands of the creative economy, Dr. Bolton steps in at a critical time, not only for the college, but for the city that it calls home. We're honored to have her here today to talk about her vision for Columbia College, her priorities as president, and what her leadership means for the students, faculty, and the broader Chicago community. Dr. Bolton, welcome to the newsroom.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's jump right in. You are stepping into this role at a pivotal moment for Columbia College. What is your vision for the institution, and what drew you to accept the presidency here in Chicago?
I think that's a great way to start off our conversation. Why Columbia, why Chicago, and why now? For me, Columbia College Chicago is one of the most innovative, creative institutions that we have in the higher education landscape. I also believe that we're at a pivotal time in our history. One I'd like to call the precipice of a Renaissance rising into our next chapter. And Renaissance are not about just redoing the same thing over, but it's really about reinventing who you are and the difference and impact that you make. And so I could not pass up an opportunity to come to one of the greatest cities in this country to be able to lead a premier creative arts institution into its next chapter of greatness. And so why Columbia? Why Chicago? Why now? Why not?
I love that. And speaking about being able to have that self-expression, what a wonderful time to be able to lead that charge in the moment that we see in our society right now. So, Columbia has always been known for its commitment to arts, to media, and to communication education. Tell us a little bit more about how you plan to ensure affordability and access to those things, as well as pathways to success for students, particularly underrepresented students and LGBTQ plus students.
Absolutely. So for us, access is not an option. I myself am a first generation college student, and I understand all too well the importance and the transformative power of an education. And so I'm very committed to that. And I know that I have a team of faculty and staff who are really supportive of our students. And ways in which we're going to ensure that that continues is one, through ensuring we have great relationships. That includes with Chicago Public Schools. 40% or so of our students come from Chicago Public Schools. And so I want to make sure that we continue to have an open pipeline, an open dialogue. How are we working in partnership with those educators to ensure that we're not just saying the students have to come and be ready for college, but how do colleges of the future meet those students where they are? And that's really where I want to position Columbia College. In addition to that, we know that resources are limited when you have first generation students, and it can put a strain on families. There's also a question just publicly in terms of the cost of higher ed. I think it is a valuable asset to transforming individuals, communities, and lives. And so we want to make sure that we're raising dollars for scholarships and leaning into our philanthropy arm of our institution to make sure that we create pathways for those students. And so access for us is not just something to say, it's not a soundbite. It is who we are and what we do, and we're very proud of that. And when our students show up, we encourage them from day one to bring the fullness of who they are and every aspect of who they are.
Absolutely.
We actually challenge them to explore every aspect of themselves so that in this space, as they matriculate through their 4-year program, that they can come into the fullness of the person they will become. I believe strongly, and I think my faculty join me in this, is when you allow a student to show up in the fullness and all their dimensions, they become better citizens of this city and ultimately better citizens of the world. And that's what we want to promote. That's what we will ensure that is sustained, even in the current context of the climate that we're in.
Absolutely. But just a little bit more on this topic of affordability. We've seen colleges and universities across the country experience funding cuts from decisions made from this current administration. Are there any concerns there on your part with regards to Columbia?
Well, I always have concerns because we're part of an ecosystem, and in higher education as a sector, you cannot function in isolation, and so it matters. And here's why it matters. One of our key partners is also with community colleges in having transfer students to be able to come to our institution and pursue their bachelor's degrees. And so any funding cuts means that it for anyone in the sector means that it may limit opportunities and access to higher education. And so, yes, I'm concerned about it, but the things that we're doing to be very proactive is how we work with our students, the financial aid packages that we put together. I've challenged the team to be more creative and bolder in working with our families. I am looking for partners in the business community that allows us to offer students internships that are paid, because that is also a factor of consideration, because students may have to work, but they can't gain that experience, and they need that experience for their career. So I think there's a myriad of approaches that we can take, and Columbia College certainly is leaning into those, but we cannot allow the limitations or the restrictions of federal funding to stop us from what we know is a much bigger need, and that is to ensure that the students in our communities who seek to pursue higher education to advance their own lives and to transform the lives of the communities in which they come from, we have to make sure that they still have access to that.
So speaking of community, Columbia sits right in the heart of downtown Chicago. So how do you see the college expanding its role as a cultural and civic anchor in the city across all communities?
So I'm so excited about this. Columbia College Chicago has what we call Manifest. It is an event that we do in the spring every year in May, in which it is the culmination of all of the senior projects across every major at our institution. It is something hard to put into words, but I am inviting the city of Chicago to join us in May of 2026, because we are going to open our doors. We do not want to make this the best kept secret at Columbia. We really want to partner with the city so that we can allow the community to come in. They will get to see everything from fine art to music to dance and fashion and design. And I love a good fashion show. And I'm telling you, you have not seen fashion until you have visited a Columbia College Chicago student-led fashion show. But we want to build better relationships. I myself come from a background in entrepreneurship and corporate business. And so I think there's an opportunity as we think about economic impact and as of our institution, but what about our neighbors around us? They support our student experience. How can we partner with them with events like Manifest or other events that we do throughout the year to ensure that as Columbia College grows, the businesses around us grow as well, and we are amplifying the city of Chicago on the public and national stage.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about equity and inclusion, and then I have a final question for you. So obviously equity and inclusion are key issues across higher education. Just tell us a little bit about what steps you plan to take to foster that campus culture where all students, again, students of color, LGBTQ+, feel valued, supported, and empowered.
Absolutely. One of my commitments very early on to our faculty, staff, and students is that I want everyone who comes into our campus to feel seen, heard, and valued. And we need to listen very deeply, but we also have to make sure our actions match our words. With that said, one of the things I'm very proud of with Columbia College is that equity and inclusion is a part of our DNA. So it's what we do. We don't have programs that we have to sunset or stop doing necessarily, because it is a part of who we are, and it's not performative. And I think that's important to distinguish that when you come here, you will see a reflection of yourself and the different identities in which you may have or adopt, and we are here to support you in the cultivation of the person you choose to become as a future creative, a future professional, and a future citizen of this world.
I love that. So in our final minute, Dr. Bolton, you've mentioned the business community, you've mentioned partnerships. Tell us, in this large landscape of financial challenges facing higher education, what can the business community do outside of internships, perhaps philanthropic organizations, to help support the financial burdens that students may be experiencing?
Absolutely. As I said before, we are a Renaissance rising, and I think it is a great opportunity for business leaders to join us in this next chapter that we develop together. The co-creation of that could include them engaging us around internships opportunities, but paid internship opportunities. So I'm going to emphasize
That's
that.
important.
Scholarships are a great way to offset the cost for students, and also being willing to step up and mentor, maybe come and be a guest speaker at our institution and talk about their own journeys, and to help our students to be career ready.
Thank you so much. I love that. It's always important to help us understand how the business community can engage and support all of the great work that you're doing. So Dr. Bolton, thank you so much for being here with us today. We are wishing you and Columbia College a great success.
Thank you.
On the other side of the break, the premiere of the new monthly enterprise segment, Inside Oversight, with Inspector General Deborah Witzburg. Stay with us.
I'm Curtis Tarver, inviting you to tune into the season premiere of Brothers Talking, a monthly program that brings together a cross-generational group of Black men, creating a brave space for honest, fearless discussion about the issues and challenges and opportunities for growth experienced by Black men. Join the conversation on CAN-TV, Cable Channel 19, or stream online at cantv.org or the CAN-TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
CAN-TV is the lens through which Chicago's stories are told, harnessing the unifying power of community television. With CAN-TV On Demand, immerse yourself in the richness of our city through exclusive stories and programs tailored just for you, connecting you to the heartbeats of our streets, the voices of our people, and the spirit that makes Chicago unique. Discover the strength of your community on CAN-TV On Demand.
As part of CAN-TV's assertive commitment to sharing with you, our viewers, news, information, and resources that make your life better, this week marks the premiere of a new monthly segment designed to promote and encourage independent oversight and empower Chicagoans with the information and resources they need to hold those in power accountable, as is each of our right and responsibility. Leading the charge is the host of Inside Oversight, Chicago's fearless Inspector General, Deborah Witzburg. Welcome back to the newsroom, Inspector General Witzburg.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. For the premiere edition of Inside Oversight, we're going behind the scenes of the City of Chicago's Office of Inspector General, shining a light on the office's mission, mandate, and day-to-day work, and how this independent watchdog agency safeguards integrity across city government. In the heart of every healthy democracy lies a simple but powerful idea. A government must be accountable to the governed. To that end, here in Chicago, the Office of Inspector General, or OIG, the city's independent, nonpartisan watchdog agency, is charged with promoting economy, effectiveness, efficiency, and integrity by identifying corruption, waste, and mismanagement in city government. It is a tremendous privilege to serve as Inspector General and to work alongside my colleagues at OIG to make city government better and to hold city actors accountable when they break the rules. OIG achieves its mission through 3 channels of work. We conduct criminal and administrative investigations, for example, into ethics or employee rule violations, fraud, and theft. We do program and policy work, where we ask whether programs and operations in city government are working as effectively, efficiently, and equitably as they should be. And finally, we work on transparency initiatives, animated by the principle that information about the government belongs to the governed. Much information about the city is theoretically publicly available, but not necessarily meaningfully publicly accessible. We publish descriptive reports and explainers, and more than 40 public-facing data dashboards, where users can access and visualize data on everything from public safety to budgets to city services by address. OIG traces its origins to the establishment of the City of Chicago Department of Investigation in 1956. The jurisdiction of the office has continued to grow since then, often in response to a scandal or a precipitating event. For example, a lawsuit filed in 1969 drove oversight of the city's employment actions. Mayor Michael Bolandic created the Office of Professional Review in 1978 after a media expose of corrupt city employees. The 2014 shooting of Laquan McDonald by a member of the Chicago Police Department led to the creation in 2016 of OIG's dedicated public safety section, devoted to oversight of the Chicago Police Department and the city's police accountability agencies. Today, OIG's jurisdiction includes all city employees, lobbyists, and contractors, appointed and elected officials, including the mayor and the city council, and certain sister agencies of the city. Over many decades, city government in Chicago has earned its reputation as broken and corrupt, and has given people every reason to assume the worst when things happen behind closed doors and in dark corners of City Hall. There's a reason the Chicago way is a proper noun. more than 36 members of Chicago City Council have pleaded guilty to or been convicted of crimes related to their official duties since 1972. Chicago's history of corruption and cronyism has led to deeply held mistrust and distrust in government and has left the city to operate at a deficit of legitimacy with its residents. We are working to pay down that deficit, shining a light into those dark corners and holding people accountable when they abuse positions of public trust. As we plan and prioritize our work, it is our highest obligation to direct our attention and resources toward those problems that most impact Chicagoans. Throughout the year, we are on the street engaging with community members across the city's neighborhoods and asking how city government can better serve you, where you have seen city government go right and where you've seen it go wrong. We reach out on busy commercial corridors, train platforms, and at community events and farmers markets with advertising on billboards, trains, and buses, and more, with an individual person-on-the-street approach designed to put OIG in direct conversation with as many people as possible to know what problems in city government Chicagoans worry most about. We can't do transparency work in secret, and we can't hold people accountable if no one is looking. We are only effective in serving our mission when Chicagoans know about and engage with our work. We want people to know that if something goes wrong, there's a government agency that will help. From police accountability to making city data meaningfully accessible, and from criminal investigations to gift rules, the office touches nearly every aspect of city government. OIG staff are attorneys, investigators, analysts, and auditors, professionals who operate independently of any political influence. Our job isn't to play politics, it's to provide analysis, not advocacy, with exceptional work rooted in data, powered by a deep commitment to the public good. In a time when public trust in institutions is fragile, the work of the Office of Inspector General is essential to rebuilding that trust. By shining light into dark corners and driving pragmatic solutions to problems, OIG helps ensure that city government works and works for everyone. At the end of the day, oversight isn't just about catching what's wrong, it's about making what's right possible. Whether safeguarding taxpayer dollars, making recommendations to improve city services, holding bad actors accountable, getting the public accessible information about their government, or reinforcing the public's trust, our work at the Office of Inspector General is dedicated to building a government that more closely resembles the one Chicagoans deserve. Suzette?
The work of the Office of the Inspector General is so critically important. Thank you so much for not just being here today, but for helping to keep Chicagoans empowered. And we are looking forward to having you back with us again next month for another episode of Inside Oversight. Coming up after the break, Hugo is joined by Angeles Ponpa, Midwest Managing Editor of Latino News Network, for a closer look at the protests unfolding across Chicagoland in response to President Trump's escalating attacks on immigrant communities. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Gregory Smith, inviting you to join Darius Hillman and me for the new Can TV original program, Petty and Profound. Each week, Darius and I are going to prove that the pettiest observations can reveal the most profound truths.
From celebrity meltdowns and political mayhem, to hidden gems of TV and the messiest moments on social media. Hop on the Petty bandwagon Wednesdays on Can TV Cable Channel 19, or stream on cantv.org or on the Can TV Plus app.
Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
For more than 40 years, Can TV has been Chicago's voice, your voice. We've shared your stories, amplified your concerns, and celebrated your triumphs. Now we want to hear from you. What programs matter most? What issues should we cover? How can we better serve your community? Visit cantv.org/feedback today. Can TV. Experience the power of community television.
On Saturday, thousands of demonstrators filled Chicago's Gallery Plaza, rallying against the Trump administration's deployment of the National Guard to the city. Covering that event was Angeles Ponpa, Midwest Managing Editor of Latino News Network. She witnessed the protests firsthand and joins us now for an in-depth look at what unfolded. Welcome, Angeles. I wanted to start the conversation in regards to what did you see on the ground? What were demonstrators telling you about their concerns, their motivations, and the messages they hope to send?
Yes, hi, Hugo. On Saturday, I was there at Gallery Plaza. How you mentioned thousands. I think the number that I saw was about 8,000 protesters on Saturday. And everyone chanting in English and Spanish. It was a lot of families. It was a lot of young people. And it was a lot of community members being there to let the Trump administration know that they are not okay with troops being deployed to the city because of the threats that he has made over the last week. When I was talking with some people, I spoke with an Army veteran who was there because of the statements Trump made about crime in Chicago. He was saying that crime isn't the issue. It should be police reform. It should be addressing the youth in Chicago. I also spoke with a man who is half Mexican, half Panamanian. He was there with his family, with his little daughter and his dad. He said his dad has already gained citizenship, but he still has friends that are scared to go out because they are undocumented. And then surprisingly enough, I also spoke with some other young girls who were there, maybe early 20s, and both educators have friends who are also in, well established, but their friends, even though they are US citizens, they are also scared to go out, and we're also scared to protest because, they're scared they're going to be pulled over just because of their skin color for speaking a different language. So it was sort of a mixture of reasons why people were there, but it was all for representing other people and to, again, make a statement to the Trump administration about his comments on Chicago lately and the amp up in ICE raids.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of profiling happening in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., as the National Guard has already been deployed over there. And we've seen a lot of ICE raids across the country, that cloud of fear that you've mentioned and so many people shared with you. And later on, we're going to be talking to some experts that are really going to provide practical information and advice on what to do in those situations. Now, organizers that spoke to you stressed that the demonstrations weren't just about sending a message to Washington. It was also about preparing residents for the realities of increased enforcement. This includes guiding families through what to do in the event of an ICE raid. Angeles, how are community leaders helping people stay informed, protected, and resilient in this moment?
So I spoke to a few of the community leaders, and they were taking some steps while at the protest and then also giving tips for what to do after the protest. So again, this protest wasn't really for protesting, it was for preparing also the community. So one of the items that I picked up while I was there, one of the organizations is actually giving out these whistles. So, if you are a community member who has one of these whistles, it's to draw attention if you see ICE around your community and make noise, let other community members know that ICE is in the area or that there is a raid being conducted, essentially to provoke noise to alarm the other residents. And while also at the protest, they were giving out the number for the hotline for ICER, which is one of the immigrant organizations, coalitions in Chicago. They were also giving people steps. So there was a spokesperson from Palenque that was there at the rally, and she was giving 6 steps, informing the people that were there on how to take videos of an ICE person in action, report these vehicles, ensuring people how to take a video, right? Do it in horizontal, who to send it to. There was a lot of that. And also telling people to go to these Know Your Rights seminars that they're having at their organizations. And also just informing people that, hey, if you do see ICE, how to act if they come to your home or if they come to your place of work. So there was a mixture of what to do there, but also what to do when they left the protest and how to help their community members.
In the minute that we have left, Angeles, with Operation Midway Blitz, the large-scale immigration enforcement initiative launched by the Department of Homeland Security, now underway in Chicago, targeting undocumented immigrants across the city and state, how do you interpret the Trump administration's decision to focus Chicago specifically?
Oh, definitely. Chicago is a sanctuary city, so we have that status, and that puts us on the Trump administration's radar. I would also say that it's because Chicago has some of the most outspoken politicians against the Trump administration and the actions that they're taking in the city. And also, Chicago is just a really great place for people to know their rights. And if those organizations are able to organize properly, it's going to put a step back to the Trump administration. And the Trump administration is kind of, playing with that to see how far they can get with sanctuary cities to then send a message across the country.
Angeles, excellent reporting. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. On the other side of the break, Avi Eusebio, Jesus del Toro, and Laura Cholula Chang join me as we continue our intentional focus on the latest attacks by the Trump administration against our immigrant communities right here in Chicago and across the country. We'll be back right after the break.
Every community has a story, a pulse, a voice waiting to be heard. At CAN TV, we bring these stories to life, from the heart of Chicago to your living room. Join us in supporting hyper-local television. Your backing helps us cover what matters directly in our communities, unfiltered and upfront. Help tell the important stories of our communities. Become a program underwriter today.
Under the Trump administration, immigration policy in the U.S. continues to shift rapidly, marked by sweeping enforcement actions, narrowed pathways to legal entry, and heightened uncertainty for immigrant communities. Recent developments include the State Department's decision to restrict immigrant visa interviews to consulates and applicants' countries of residence or nationality, the expansion of U.S. citizenship and immigration services powers to hire armed agents with arrest authority, the termination of temporary protected status for nearly 270,000 Venezuelans, and the largest single-site immigration raid in U.S. history, where 475 workers were detained at a Hyundai LG plant in Georgia. Joining us now to help unpack these developments are Avi Eusebio, manager of the Anti-Hate Action Center at the Chinese American Service League, Jesus del Toro, editor-in-chief of La Raza, and Laura Cholula Chang, senior Know Your Rights attorney with the Immigrant Legal Defense Project. Thank you all for joining us. I want to start the conversation with you, Jesus. This past weekend, and we saw, as Angeles told us, protests happening in downtown Chicago in anticipation of the continued National Guard threats looming and community events like El Grito canceled. How are immigrant communities processing this moment, and what are you seeing on the ground in terms of fear, resistance, and preparation?
Thank you, Hugo, for having me. And as you mentioned, we are now experiencing a situation that is full of fear, unfortunately, full of tension, because the threat of the presence in a larger way of ICE agents and even the National Guard possibility has been making for all the immigrant communities. In my case, I know more the Latino communities, but for any immigrant communities, these times very complicated, very perilous, very frightening. And also because it's not just that these operatives, this new policy, this new approach is threatening just the undocumented immigrants. In fact, in the case of the Latino communities and in the case of many other diversity communities, it's a direct attack to our identities, to our heritage as a whole, which is also more frightening to the communities because, as we saw, for example, in California, racial profiling arrests are now again valid after this recent judicial decision, and the fear that this could happen here in a larger way is very hard. But in the same case, the communities are resilient. Local organizations are working a lot to inform our community about rights, like the two organizations that have here, and others are working very hard. ICER, for example, Resurrection Project, OCADE. They are, and many others are working very hard to help our community to learn our rights, to defend our rights, and also to help our community to navigate, if this is the correct word, no, these hard moments. For example, by protesting if you want to, but peacefully, with order, with respect. And in the case of the past and coming Mexican independence celebrations, of course, our community is deciding to do them. The 26th Street parade is going to happen. El Grito in Pilsen is going to happen. Unfortunately, we have this Grito Chicago here in the downtown area council, but our communities are thinking that our pride, our heritage is paramount, is a key component of America, and then we will celebrate it peacefully and organizing ourselves in order to be able to resist and to, well, be thinking ahead in this coming or possible operations by ICE or other federal agencies.
And there's a lot of conversations that are being had, families talking about what to do should you be stopped by ICE or be detained. And these are real conversations that people are having over this, as you mentioned, this cloud of fear. When you see things, Laura, like what we saw in the raid in Georgia, 475 workers, most of them South Korean, detained, it really sends shockwaves to our communities to really, that says, well, if it happened there, it could certainly happen here, and certainly the continued rhetoric that we're hearing from Washington, D.C. I wanted to ask you, in regards to families and that particular incident, how are you advising communities to prepare for similar scale operations, especially in light of the expanded U.S. CIS powers and the threat of ICE raids?
Yeah, there are two lessons Chicago families should take away from this incident. The first lesson is that everyone, regardless of their immigration status, is protected by the Constitution. Everyone must know their rights and exercise every single one. Demand warrants, remain silent. The second lesson is that families must create safety plans in the event a family member is detained. NIJC is keeping a close eye on how USCIS does use its new expanded powers. If you are currently or plan to file an application with USCIS, we recommend to seek out legal advice with a reputable attorney or legal service provider. I encourage families to visit our website for resources on all these subjects at immigrantjustice.org. Finally, if you see an ICE raid, report it and document. Do not let ICE work in the shadows.
Yeah, and that's very important information. Don't be afraid, be informed. There are resources out there at your disposal and people willing to help you in order to walk through those situations that hopefully won't happen, but it's very important to prepare, as it's already been said. Abby, federal rhetoric is intensifying. How are these developments intersecting with anti-immigrant hate and broader patterns of racial scapegoating? Those trends that we see in data, how is CASL helping communities respond, not just with protection, but with solidarity as well as healing?
Yeah, the changes in immigration policy are resulting in this rise of anti-immigrant rhetoric and blatant racial scapegoating. From the API perspective, we've been seeing examples of how this increase in anti-immigrant rhetoric is playing out, where you see travel bans that are specifically targeting specific countries and regions such as Asia, African countries, Middle Eastern countries. Chinese nationals are being revoked of their student visas, or they're being taken away and not renewed. Other things happening across the world. We're seeing also in New York, we had the Democratic mayoral candidate Zohran Mamadi win the Democratic mayoral race, but that has now caused an increase in anti-Muslim, anti-Arab rhetoric. You're seeing that online. There's this fear that's being stoked that there's going to be a Muslim takeover if he becomes mayor. And so we're trying to make sure that we are monitoring this, responding to it, and trying to prevent more of this kind of rhetoric from happening. And locally here in Chicago's Chinatown, we saw that in May there were 3 Chinese nationals who were arrested right actually by our building. And unfortunately, that even within the API community is increasing also this rhetoric of, oh, well, those criminals deserved it. And really making sure that people feel like these people are being arrested are point-blank criminals without due process and their fair time in court, and making sure that people understand that these are cases that affect all immigrant communities, and we should be mindful of how the negative impact is resulting from this.
Yeah, and it's very important to continue to talk about, even though, especially in media, it seems to be that when we talk about immigration, it's the Trump administration attacking the Hispanic Latino community with an emphasis on Mexicans and Mexican Americans, but we're talking about all immigrants. So it's very important, and it's our responsibility in media to provide greater visibility and voice to all communities. And we saw this type of scapegoating at the height of COVID-19, especially with the Asian community, and we're seeing it again. I have one last question for all of you. In moments like this, when immigrant communities are facing both policy threats and public fear, how do you, in your roles as legal advocates, journalists, community organizers, working together to build trust, share accurate information, and counter misinformation that can spread so quickly in this type of crisis? I'll start with you, Jesus.
Well, we try as much as possible to interact with all the very relevant organizations that are defending the rights of our immigrant communities to have trusted sources of whatever information we disseminate to our users and readers, because that is the most important thing. In these moments, misinformation, disinformation is rampant and create a lot of chaos, additional problems to what we already have. And then the need and the importance of trusted, fact-based news and also advice in some ways, even if as media we do not provide legal advice, but we refer to the experts that do that. That is very important. And also because, as mentioned, our whole communities are threatened, not just if you have certain status or not. And in that context, we believe that highlighting the great solutions, the great relevance, the great achievements of our communities is key, because that shows that our communities are part of the American society, are contributing in a larger way to the wellness of everybody, and also their traditions, our heritage, our identity is wonderful. It's not something that we will allow to be stigmatized and diminished, as unfortunately we are seeing these efforts. We are resistant, and we try to keep going with this good message, even if, of course, these are hard moments, difficult moments for many, and we try to balance both kind of information to inform, but also to empower our communities in these times.
Very important, and La Raza does an excellent job of informing, educating, and empowering the community to act. And it's that type of collaboration also that's needed, which is very wonderful to have this platform, to have you three experts really come together and provide the information that our audience needs. Laura, you're already given some really good information of how families prepare. What else can you share with us?
I will finally just encourage the public to report any potential ICE sightings to the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights Family Support Hotline. That number is 855-435-7693.
Thank you very much. And Abby, you have the last word.
So solidarity in numbers is really our shield. Our legal protections are our shield, our weapon against these harmful attacks, and the education, as mentioned, that this is where we're going to keep Chicago a hard city to navigate by these federal agents, because we're informed. And we need to all, make sure that we're only spreading truth, information, validated resources, and not panic, so that we are informed and we do stay safe. We need to check on our neighbors, check on our loved ones, make sure that they have the information they need around their rights, and join the efforts that a lot of our organizations are doing around canvassing neighborhoods, making sure people have those resources and the information about their rights, and also continue referring people to these trusted organizations such as NIJC, the Resurrection Project, ICER, and Chinese American Service League, because we do have the services to help these families that are impacted navigate this really challenging time by connecting them to legal resources, connecting them to mental health resources, connecting them to information about public benefits that they actually might also be eligible for. So together, we're going to make sure that we keep our city safe and protected.
Yeah. Abby, Jesus, Laura, thanks again for your time. And thank you for standing in the gap for our communities. Suzette?
Thank you, Hugo. That's our time for this week. Thank you to all of our guests and to you, Chicago, for making CAN TV a part of your day.
And he's back next week for another all-new edition of Chicago Newsroom 2.0.
And I'll be back as her guest co-host.
Until then, be well and well informed.